et Cédric Dumas, maître de conférence à l'IMT Atlantique, qui est bien à distance. Et moi-même, donc, qui est assuré à la présidence du jury, c'est Léchappé. Je laisse la parole à Aurélien pour une présentation sur le travail pendant 45 minutes. Voilà.
Okay. So thank you. Stop. So hello everyone. My name is Aurélien Léchappé. I'm glad to present to you the thesis work I have completed over the past few years. The thesis is about measuring and modeling team activity in virtual reality from social signals to collaboration in Thesis. It was supervised by Cédric Fleury, Cédric Dumas, and Mathieu Cholet. I would also like to thank the reviewers and examiners for their presence, and especially the reviewer for reviewing my work. First, I will begin by explaining why it is important to evaluate collaboration. So in this thesis, we study team collaboration and the factors that may render it ineffective or even lead to its failure. Examples of collaborative contexts that illustrate well this point are those that take place in critical systems, where collective failure can have serious consequences. Such situations include the medical domain, for example, in surgery, where communication or coordination issue can lead to adverse events, or aviation and emergency intervention, where ineffective collaboration can directly compromise the safety of the individual involved. So why should we evaluate collaboration? While it is well known that disruption in collaboration can lead to critical situations, we still lack precise knowledge about the concrete factors that contribute to this failure. So this thesis aims to better understand and evaluate the mechanisms involved in collaborative activities, to extract knowledge that allow to assess the collaboration during the activity, and to detect early signs of collaboration breakdown. So evaluating collaboration in such context, more generally in real-world context, can be complex for several reasons, including access to technical equipment, availability of personnel, ethical consideration. So for this reason, within the framework of this thesis, I choose to evaluate collaboration through collaborative activities implemented within virtual reality environment. So several reasons motivate this choice. First, virtual reality environment allows to collect rich multimodal data such as eye tracking, body position, gesture, and voice, which will be much harder to record in real-world settings. Virtual reality also offers a controlled and repeatable environment to study collaboration. External variables are minimized, and the same collaborative situation can easily be reproduced. So in this thesis, virtual reality is used as a control environment to develop an assessment approach intended to be applicable both in virtual and in real-world collaborative environments. Then this thesis is structured around two complementary research objectives. First, it aims to explore how computer science can contribute to the assessment of collaboration. More specifically, to what extent can computational tools and approach enable the automatic real-time characterization of collaboration within a team? So this thesis is situated within a social AI perspective, evaluating the relevance and usefulness of social signals that are collected and computed computationally. Secondly, from a more psychological perspective, the thesis investigates to what extent it is possible to validate a model for evaluating this dimension based on these derived indicators extracted from individual behavioral signals. Now, I will move on to the state of the art of this thesis. So before analyzing collaboration, we must first define what it is. Collaboration is not just people working together. In this thesis, I define collaboration as a horizontal, synchronous, and coordinated activity where individuals continuously adapt to one another, shared knowledge and resources, build a shared understanding of the situation, and flexibly adjust their action to achieve a common goal. So the first body of work I review concerns how collaboration has been conceptually modeled. Classic model widely used in CSCW and CSCL area of research, such as the 3C model, describe collaboration of coordination, communication, and cooperation. However, this model has a high level, so they explain what collaboration is, but not the mechanism involved in its operation. As a result, authors point out a gap between these conceptual models and more operationalized approach to collaboration assessment. To bridge this gap, the literature progressively shifts toward a process-oriented view of collaboration. Authors point out the existence of collaboration processes, such as common ground, awareness, and regulation. These processes are continuously constructed and maintained during interaction. So when we look at these processes, the question arises, how can they be observed and measured? So for that, researchers have looked at directly measurable behavior during the activity, such as gaze, position in the space, action performed, and speech. Many studies have linked behavioral indicators, behavioral signals and indicators to these collaboration processes and dimension, and have tested an automated computation of these indicators. However, the research on automated collaboration assessment based on individual behavior has been a long time limited by technology. So it was not until the beginning of the last decade that we start to see emerging increasingly efficient data collection tools. So these tools has accelerated and developed the research on multimodal analysis of collaboration processes into an area of research named MMCA for multimodal collaboration analytics. So this thesis work builds on this approach, specifically by connecting automatically computed indicators to collaboration processes and dimensions. However, this approach raises challenges because indicators are only proxies and they must be theoretically bounded. So this brings us to the question of which indicators are actually relevant to consider. So despite the diversity of context and methods, the literature shows clear convergence on a subset of collaboration indicators that can be measured automatically. Here is an overview of some of the behavioral indicators we consider. So dominance with the task and verbal distribution within the individuals. Joint attention with joint visual attention, which is where individuals look at the same thing or object at the same time. Gaze and peers when they look at each other. Mutual gaze when they look at each other at the same time. Dialogue management with like the conversational flow, with presence of turn-taking, interruption. Spatial behaviors with the proximity between the individuals, the physical synchrony, and also presence of specific type of gestures. The speech content. And the group characteristic, such as if individuals are engaged or not, their expertise, and also the social proximity between the individuals. So most studies consider these indicators either independently or within limited modality. So however, some authors propose classification approach of collaboration based on some of these indicators. Previous research has shown that collaboration profile can be described using various of the underlying behavioral indicators. So some authors proposed taxonomy of collaboration profiles, but this taxonomy were mostly limited to two types of indicators. And most of the proposed classification have focused on the gel. As previously underlined, virtual reality provides a powerful context that allows control, instrumented, and repeatable collaborative situation. However, what's about evaluating collaboration in this context? Existing research has evaluated collaboration its dimension primarily based on questionnaire rather than directly measuring collaboration processes. Other research has focused on designing virtual reality systems that foster collaboration. And more recently, researchers are begun using virtual reality specifically to evaluate collaboration itself. However, it appears that evaluating collaboration in virtual reality environment remains an open challenge. Indeed, research shows that collaboration in virtual reality can be influenced by factors specific to the medium. In particular, the sense of presence and co-presence play a key role and is strongly affected by individuals' avatar quality. At the same time, communication, which take a crucial place in collaboration, strongly relies on nonverbal cues, which are affected by avatar types and also device characteristics, such as field of view, resolution of the screen of the device. So since social interaction relies heavily on nonverbal cues, the potential degradation in virtual reality raises an important question about how collaboration unfolds in virtual environment and how comparable it is to real-world context. So several important research gaps emerge from the literature review. This can be classified into 4 categories according to the topic we address. So real-time assessment, multimodal modeling, validation and transferability, and the collaboration scope of the existing studies. For the first category, the literature highlights that few studies have yet focused on automatic real-time collaboration, and even fewer in virtual collaborative environment. Furthermore, most classification-based assessment approaches are conducted a posteriori. Secondly, few studies propose assessment approach that combine 3 or more types of indicators modality, whether for a global collaboration assessment or profile-based classification assessment approach. Also, the validation of indicators of collaboration in virtual reality is a field of research that has not been extensively explored. Finally, it appears that most studies that aim at evaluating collaboration using quantitative indicators are focused on dyadic collaborative situation. So this research gap can be summarized into challenge, which some of them will be addressed in studies conducted during this thesis. So the first study focused on evaluating the relevance of collaboration indicators in virtual reality context and an automatic and multimodal collaboration evaluation approach. The next 2 studies also address the challenge. However, the second study focuses more on collaboration profile, while the first study explores the challenge associated with a triad collaborative situation. Finally, the first study examines the relevance and stability of collaboration indicators between real and virtual collaborative contexts. I will now go on to the contribution of this thesis. So the first 2 studies focus on collaborative dyadic situation. As underlined, the first study aims to explore the validation of collaboration indicators in virtual reality dyadic collaborative context, as well as an automated approach to compute this indicator. In this study, the indicators considered are the speaking time distribution equality, joint visual attention, turn taking, and mutual gaze. This study has the following research question and hypothesize that collaboration level can be assessed using a limited set of quantitative, verbal, and visual indicators. So here's the collaborative virtual reality task we designed. It includes 3 main phases. The first consists of collecting puzzle pieces scattered around the room. The second consists in assembling the puzzle on a shared board. And the last one consists in coloring the puzzle according to a reference figure. So we capture the frequency of various indicators of collaboration. So speaking time distribution within the group, turn taking with overlap, which correspond to a situation where one individual starts to speak while the other already speak. It's an indicator of active participation. Visual attention and mutual gaze. Each session were segmented into comparable 20-second collaboration segments, which were annotated by experts as no collaboration, collaboration with leadership, and active collaboration. We then look at the correlation between the collaboration indicators and the collaboration level. So this study hypothesized that a high collaboration quality is associated with less dominance, so a lower speaking time distribution, a higher frequency of turn taking with overlap, greater joint visual attention, more mutual gaze, and that a higher frequency of joint visual attention is associated with a higher frequency of mutual gaze. First, so correlation were observed between all indicators of collaboration except mutual gaze and the level of collaboration. So this moderately validates the hypothesis related to the first research question. Then we have plotted the free collaboration level regarding the indicators. So on this graph, you can see the speaking time distribution according to the various collaboration levels. So no collaboration, leadership, and active collaboration. We note that the speaking time distribution allows to differentiate between active and leadership and no collaboration, but struggle to differentiate no from collaboration with leadership. The opposite is observed for the turn taking and joint visual attention indicators, which struggles in differentiating leadership from active collaboration, as you can see. And we didn't find any correlation between mutual gaze and active collaboration. For the second research question, we find that the indicators considered, except for mutual gaze, allow us to differentiate between a low and high level of collaboration. But that the ability to detect collaboration varies depending on the indicator. So this point specifically doesn't allow us to validate the hypothesis related to the third research question. So based on the signals collected, I performed additional analysis on task participation indicators. I then looked at user interactions such as hovering, selecting, or positioning puzzle pieces across the collaboration levels. However, no significant result were found for this indicator. So the task we used may have influenced the lack of results regarding these indicators. So regarding the experiment limitation, there are a few things to consider. First, the time window it shows could have influenced the relevance of the indicator considered. Then, it could be interested to explore the use of other indicators to better discriminate collaboration level. The irrelevance of user interaction and mutual gaze in this experiment could be explained by the type of task or the avatar used in the environment. Then we look at the indicator individually between different collaboration segments, but it might be more relevant to analyze them together for a finer distinction between collaboration profiles. So this is specifically the point that is explored in the following study. So as outlined by the challenge presented here, the second study focuses on computing collaboration indicators for the purpose of automatically classifying collaboration profiles. For this, we consider new collaboration indicators compared to the last study, which are verbal participation, gaze on peers, and task equality. Indeed, we propose in this study to adapt existing collaboration profiles for an automated computation based on collected and derived collaboration indicators. I then defined 7 collaboration profiles adapted from existing taxonomies and an observational study. Each profile represents a different point along a continuum of collaboration dynamics. So the following graph represents the continuum of collaboration dynamics. So firstly, each profile can be characterized depending on the strategy employed by the individuals, which can be individual or collaborative. Then the profile can be distinguished based on several indices of and collaboration constraints, which are task contribution equality. So if they work individually or collectively, presence of discussion, and the awareness of the other. So let's look at some examples. For the first profile, named Everything Nothing, one participant disengaged completely from the task with no verbal participation, no awareness of the other. We then have an unequal task repartition in this profile. This is like the worst collaboration profile. Independent solitary, where both participants will work separately without coordination and considering each other. Sociable, so they still work individually, but this time remain aware of each other. Moving on to the collaborative strategy, we can find profile characterized by dominance. So the first is leader-follower, where one participant clearly takes the lead, both physically and verbally in the task. Teacher-student, where one individual contributes more physically and the other more verbally. This is typical of a guided collaboration situation. And turn-takers, which are the most balanced and collaborative profile, with both task and verbal equality and awareness of each other. So there is a constant update of their shared understanding in the two profiles, but the quality of the common ground is not as good in the non-accurate profile as in the accurate one. So our objective here is to test an assessment model that aims to detect each of these profiles during the activity. So to test our detection approach of this profile, we needed to have references for each of the collaboration profile. To do so, based on this profile, we designed stereotyped collaborative scenario in virtual reality. These were performed by actors to reproduce realistic behavior corresponding to each profile. So these recordings serve as a reference data to test our detection model of collaboration profile. Our detection pipeline works as follows. So every 5 seconds, we compute behavioral indicators on a 20-second sliding windows. Then the indicators are normalized between 0 and 1. Each profile is defined by specific value range for each indicators. So you don't have to all of the displayed value. It's like data of the profile that are based on the listener observation. So each indicator's range is updated at this time. Two filters are applied. The first filter checks if at least 2 discriminant indicators are detected for each profile. Then a second filter removes false positive by considering as detected only the profile with a confidence score above 0.5. So we use and test the proposed profile detection approach on the various collaborative scenarios played by actors. We hypothesize that our model would correctly classify collaboration profiles for the different scenarios, and that we find a higher detection rate and confidence value when the tested profile match the collaborative scenario. Results show that our model performs moderately for extreme profiles, but struggle with intermediate one, such as sociable, leader follower, or teacher student. So extreme profiles were detected with a high confidence, but with some false positive. In contrast, mid-continuum profiles were harder to distinguish, likely because their behavioral pattern overlap. So this result suggests that our approach can moderately differentiate extreme collaboration profiles, but not subtle one, with the presence of false positive. So this may be due to the limited set of indicators or to the collaborative virtual task, not too specific to the detection of those profiles. We can mention a few limitations for this study. First, our data came from simulated scenarios instead of scenarios with naive participants. The indicator value range also were drawn from literature rather than learned from data, which may have influenced the quality of the detection. The relative importance of each indicator and the number of indicators needed for a reliable detection remain an open question. Lastly, it could be interesting also to extend this framework to larger groups to analyze team dynamics beyond that. So the first study explores this point, evaluating collaborative interaction in triad and adding spatial and physical indicators to the collaboration assessment approach. So this study aimed to explore the use of spatial and physical indicators to assess collaboration and evaluating a triadic rather a dyadic collaborative situation. For that, we introduce consideration of new collaboration indicators, which are physical activity level, physical synchrony, so to evaluate individual engagement and synchronization within the task, as well as proximity and face information to evaluate how individuals organize themselves in the space during the activity. So in line with the challenge addressed, here are the research question for this study. So can triadic collaboration states be inferred from aggregated dyadic profile? Those partial measures will be capture triadic collaboration, and two proposed multimodal indicators will be capture triadic collaboration states in dynamics. So 27 triads complete a puzzle-solving task of increasing difficulty. Among the indicators considered in this study, as I said before, we added the level of physical activity, physical synchrony, proximity, and facing formation. Individual characteristics such as mental rotationability and leadership tendency were also obtained through questionnaires. Finally, collaboration were made between team performance in completing each puzzle, self-collaboration assessments, and collaboration score derived from computed collaboration indicator. So as highlighted in the conclusion of the previous study, the virtual environment we used was no longer aligned with our research objective. So it was limited to 2 collaborators, did not allow participants to work simultaneously in separate space, and relied on avatar with poor non-verbal cues, and also offer few opportunities for object manipulation and co-manipulation. So to address this limitation, we designed a new collaborative task. This task was defined through co-design workshop and then implemented in a new virtual environment. So in this task, participants must complete 4 structures of increasing complexity in a limited time. So they must connect the top and bottom area of the table with a single structure, and the number of points to connect at the top and bottom varies depending on the structure. So for the task, participants have access to an area where they can iterate on the structures. Okay. Next, participants must coordinate to create the pieces associated with the structure they want to build. At the same time, they can start building the structure on the central table. Once the structure is finished, individuals can validate it. He's very happy because he succeeded. Yes. And then they go into the next structures. So we compute a performance score for each structure, comparing the team performance with the optimal performance that can be achieved. We also compute collaboration dimension score based on the computed indicators, and an overall dimension-based collaboration score that correspond to the average value of the dimension score. Finally, team collaboration profiles, which correspond to the aggregation of the 3 dyadic collaboration pairs, simplified into 3 categories, reflecting the underlying interaction dynamics within the dyads, which are individuals, hierarchical, and balanced. The result regarding the mean completion time and performance score across structures reveal that we have an increasing level of complexity within the structure. Regarding questionnaires, no results were found between performance and leadership tendency. However, we found that an individual with a good mental rotation ability in the group fosters the group performance. So no triadic profile emerged as a direct predictor of task performance. Also, in their current form, triadic collaboration profiles cannot be inferred from aggregated dyadic collaboration profiles. So more specifically, our result indicates that collaboration dynamics often emerge at the dyadic level and do not necessarily generalize to the entire triad. So this suggests that effective group collaboration may not require all members or all pairs to be fully coordinated at the same time. We found that our dimension score and dimension-based collaboration score were not correlated with performance and self-collaboration assessment score. So this result suggests that combining indicators in 2 dimensions or a single score may not capture sufficient or relevant information to represent the complexity of dynamics. To investigate this, we analyze the relationship between all computed indicators. So here is the correlation matrix showing the link between the various indicators. The matrix has been simplified to show only significant correlation. We found several subsets of indicators. The first is related to the spatiality of interaction, with indicators reflecting that an active participation in the task is generally followed by attentional alignment and coordinated spatial positioning around a space of interest. A second set underlined task-oriented activity phases with correlation between physical synchrony, task equality, activity level, and the presence of gaze and peers. A third subset highlights co-located discussion strategy with positive correlation between indicators, presence of gaze and peers and information, and decreasing physical activity level. Lastly, some relationship highlight more transversal mechanisms. For example, joint visual attention is negatively correlated with the level of physical activity, indicating that a high level of physical engagement by the collaborator can interfere with maintaining simultaneously a simultaneous focus on a certain center of interest. This correlation matrix shows a correlation between the indicators that each structure realizes. So the result reveals that the relevance of some indicators may depend on the difficulty level. Regarding the limitation of this study, the result highlights that collaborative dynamics often emerge at dyadic level without necessarily generalizing uniformly on the entire triad. This result, along with the one on the relevance of collaboration score to reflect performance and subjective collaboration, highlights the need for a task and context-specific interpretation of collaboration indicators. This point is confirmed by the indicator subset found, which underline that a detection during the activity will provide a more accurate understanding of collaboration dynamics than a global score based on collaboration indicators without presence of context. So far, all the studies I present focus on collaboration assessment within virtual reality. As part of a doctoral internship, I had the opportunity to run a study with the objective to compare various collaboration indicators in virtual and real-world context. So this study is interesting for different reasons. First, it explores collaboration in different social situations than the one explored in the previous study. It also aims to explore challenge of the stability and transferability of collaboration indicators across contexts. Here are the research questions associated with the study. So are the social signals stable across context? And can we identify some signals that have some difficulty in virtual reality? In this study, we use 4 social discussion tasks in both face-to-face and virtual context with varying social constraints involving different degree of participation and group selves. And regarding the indicator evaluated, we look at proxemics, social synchronization, and conversational dynamics indicators. We show that some indicators, such as physical proxemics, remain stable across reality, while others, such as social synchronization and conversational dynamics, appear altered in virtual reality compared to face-to-face interaction. Overall, this study provides a benchmark for identifying which collaboration indicators can be reused across contexts and which require their specific interpretation. Now that the study have been presented, I'll be able to outline the various contribution associated with this thesis, as well as perspective for future research. As a reminder, here are the research objectives explored in this thesis. So, real-time operationalization of collaboration indicators and identification and classification of collaboration states using these derived collaboration indicators. To summarize, the contribution of this thesis are structured around 3 points. The first is the development of a model and a technical architectures for automatically assess the collaboration states during the activity. The second refers to the validation of a low-level signals to report on the collaboration process and some aspects of it. And the third concerns the exploration and extension of the domains and context in which the collaboration process is studied and assessed. More specifically, study work on dyadic collaboration in virtual reality. So they validate the relevance of key verbal and visual indicators and show that combining them collaboration profiles enable a real-time detection of extreme collaboration state. Study 3 extends this approach to triadic collaboration and highlights the limit of aggregating dynamic assessment and show that collaboration in small group is highly dynamic and phase-based. Finally, study 4 addresses the generalization of collaboration assessment indicators across contexts. Overall, this thesis contributes on various aspects. On a theoretical perspective, the thesis contributes in providing an updated taxonomy of dyadic collaboration profiles, as well as a replicable collaboration profile detection approach. From an empirical perspective, thesis provides evidence that collaboration is dynamic, context-sensitive, and cannot be reduced to a single score. On a technical perspective, the thesis contributes to providing a real-time multimodal framework for collaboration assessment based on the PSI framework. The approach was explored and validated across various collaborative contexts, group size, and interaction modalities. It also provides real-time components to compute collaboration indicators. And lastly, one dataset from the study on collaboration profiles was provided to the research community, and the dataset from the study of on triadic collaboration will be available soon as an artifact of this thesis. Regarding the perspective of this thesis, the first one concerns the type of collaboration task considered for real-time assessment. You can see here the McGrath circumplex model of group tasks, distinguishing cognitive from behavioral task and collaborative from conflict one. While this thesis focuses on planning, intellective, and psychomotor tasks, extending the approach to other task categories to reveal indicators and dynamics specific to this collaborative context. The second perspective concerns the use of fixed versus dynamic time window. So exploring different temporal scale could help determine which indicators should be analyzed over short or longer window to better capture collaboration dynamics across context. A promising perspective concerns the use of alternative statistical and algorithmic methods to better assess collaboration indicators. Approaches such as clustering or supervised and unsupervised learning will help identify which indicators are relevant in specific collaborative context. In parallel, temporal models such as Bayesian approach or Markov chains could capture transition between collaboration phases and reveal recurring group dynamics. In this thesis, we were able to collect a range of data, mainly behavioral, based on the sensor used. So we're able to demonstrate the relevance of indicators, particularly verbal, visual, and spatial ones, in assessing the collaboration quality. Some indicators such as turn taking, gaze and peers, joint visual attention, social synchronization, and face information seems particularly relevant for assessing collaboration. In addition to it, it could be interesting to explore other indicators based on other signals, such as physiological signals or voice signals. The last two will be useful for looking at a world relevant area that hasn't been covered in this work, which are emotion. Also, studies have shown that culture, gender, social proximity can influence some indicators of collaboration, particularly proxemics and speech. Could be interesting to explore the impact of these characteristics on collaboration indicators. And as we saw in the conclusion of this thesis, collaboration cannot be summarized by a simple score. We must therefore find relevant way to represent the quality of collaboration. One idea could be to work on a visualization that reflects these different dimensions and group dynamics. This visualization could be helpful for expert assessment within the task or such as for a first non-evaluated attempt was proposed during this thesis. So in this visualization, each point refers to represent an individual, and the line between the points represents the relationship between pairs of individuals. Each line represents a collaboration indicators, and indicators are also computed at the group level and are visible at the bottom. Then the visualization is updated at regular interval and is based on the last 20 seconds of activity. To finish this presentation, some open questions. First, what is a good collaboration? It's a very critical question. The answer to this question will depend on how we approach the evaluation of collaboration. So do we base it on task performance or on how individuals interact with each other? We also need to consider the influence of individual characteristics, leadership, expertise, yeah. So our research, among others, underlined that performance is not very effective to relate on collaboration quality. We find across this study that indicators are stable while others are altered in virtual reality. Other questions remain unexplored, like are some indicators more or less altered or stable in virtual reality, depending on the individual's characteristic, on the type of tasks performed. And in this thesis, I focused on evaluating and categorizing collaboration by deriving indicators from social signals that can be collected during the activity. From another perspective, it could be interesting to explore the use of feedback to foster collaboration and to assess its relevance in fostering specific collaborative states or group dynamics. So this reflection marks the end of the presentation. Thank you all for listening and for your attention during this presentation. Here are some of the publication done during this thesis. Thank you.
Now we have the discussion with each jury member. First, I will now invite Professor Anthony Steed to speak. We have about 20 minutes for your comments and questions. And after we have some question and discussion with Greg. Clavel, and the colleague presents Jean-Marie Ducarte. Estelle Schloff, and the director of Thesis, Mathieu Chelot, Cédric Dumas et Cédric Philippe. Anthony?
I'm sorry, where I can't hear the chairperson very well. Should I start?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Sorry. Hello, and thank you for the presentation, Aurélien. It was very interesting, and I read the thesis with some interest, and we've worked in a similar area before, and there's all sorts of ways of tackling collaboration in collaborative virtual environments. Can I check? Maybe this is a question for the chair. Has Aurélien seen my written report?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. So perhaps correctly or perhaps incorrectly, there were some questions in there, and I'll pick a few of those. We can have a discussion about. These are things which I think are particularly interesting. But I'd like to start with a very high-level question, which is. You've done studies in virtual reality, and your fourth study was a comparison between real and virtual. But what confidence do you have that the indicators that you reviewed in chapter 2 are appropriate for the sort of the virtual reality scenario? You did mention this in the presentation and the thesis that some things are, some of these are easy to track in virtual reality, but could you just talk about whether or not there were any big gaps in the review that you found, and how you decided on which indicators to use?
Okay. So I use specific verbal and visual indicators, so that are already being studied in virtual reality. And I evaluate also the relevance of this indicator in the first study. So this is why I use them in the second study. For the other indicators that have been added in the second study, I will go on to this one.
We can stick with the first study, actually. But the literature that you reviewed in some depth is presumably mostly based on studies that are not done in virtual reality.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So they've chosen indicator. So my hypothesis is that they've chosen indicators that they were able to get access to, right? Say from video, possibly not even from head-worn. So are there any particular advantages or disadvantages to using virtual reality?
Okay. Yeah, this is why I should get, for example, gaze and peer and joint visual attention are usually derived from head positioning or this type of signals. So in virtual reality, we were able to detect with some better accuracy this type of indicators. So it's the same indicators, but it's more relevant in virtual reality because we have access to the data. And indeed, yeah, for task equality, role participation, it's true that it's more because it's like the more easily indicators that we can compute. Yeah, I mean, for this profile, as I based my profile, my collaboration profile on existing literature, I think it's also interesting to evaluate the relevance of these indicators in the virtual collaborative context. So this is what I have done in the first study also, and the first one. So yeah, but it's true that you speak in your report of evaluating maybe more the link between the indicators in the second study. I think that I have not performed, unfortunately. Yeah, maybe it could. We could find some interesting insight in it. But
okay, for example, in virtual reality, eye gaze tracking is very good, right? So, what was meant? So, a bit of the job of an examiner in where I come from is to test your background knowledge. What did they specifically mean by gaze on peers in the literature, and are you implementing it the same way? Because it obviously in VR, in virtual reality, you have a very exact gaze pointer, and it can be, you can hit an avatar. So, in the previous literature, is it done the same way, or is it more based on somebody's rating of whether or not they were looking at the person?
Yeah, so there indeed, yeah, we had some expert evaluation, observation.
Yeah.
So we saw that this person look at this person or look at the same area. There are also automated approach to assess the relevance of these indicators, but as I said, it was based on pictures analysis. So we saw in the picture that this person look approximately at this point. So this was done in real world context, using some pictures analysis. And yeah, indeed, in virtual reality, we can just trigger when we look at a specific avatar, so we have a more precise data. So it's not compute in the same way, but that's the way I look and I find on the literature.
Yeah, I mean, my comment on that is this is probably right down at the level of interval analysis that you mentioned a couple of times in your presentation, which is eye gaze is very noisy. So even if it's at somebody for some period of time, it's very rarely stable on them. So I imagine somebody looking at it would rate it as being towards them, even if it was dotting around on and off their head. So I think you might be underestimating gaze look on people compared to sort of a human rating of, are you looking at them, simply because the eye tracking data is, it's not that it's noisy because of tracker error, it's just that the eyes aren't stable, right? So they're always moving around. And
yeah. And also just considering these indicators, I mean, when we have an expert assessment, it just don't look at okay, you look at this person. It consider also the distance between the individuals, if they work on different tasks, or yeah. And this is a thing that I point on the first study. Maybe like considering if people work in the same space. If they work in the same page, we can then maybe look at if we find some joint visual attention or some gains of peers. I think this need in virtual reality specific treatment filter to compute the data and interpret the data.
Mutual of focus on an object is almost vanishingly unlikely unless you say that it's within a certain number of seconds that you look at the same object. Because of the timing of I guess. Okay, all right. So another high level question, and you did put this one at the end, so of your presentation. How much do you think the specific tasks had an impact on the profile? And you mentioned McGrath's breakdown, but I'm thinking of what the task is set at. But even within your puzzle tasks, there are many ways of constructing the task. And so, in retrospect, do you think that the tasks are appropriately set, or could you recommend tasks that are sort of more amenable to the types of measure that you're doing?
I agree that the first task has a lot of implies a lot of things when we look at the indicator. For example, in the first task, we find that people most of the time just remain side by side, and this can explain the lack of result we got on the mutual gaze. So the first task implies a lot of things. This is why in the second task that we developed, I wanted to have very different space to allow people to organize themselves, to move, to have different group dynamics. Maybe for the indicators I consider also, I should maybe on tasks with more discussion rather than just physical task. It implies a lot of,
even the placement of the objects, right? So there is quite a lot of work on side-by-side versus over-the-table collaboration, focusing. Even just there's so many variants on what you could do with the space. So making it impossible if you do stand side by side, so forcing people to move. All of those negotiations are could be quite extensive, couldn't they? About and again, very amenable to virtual reality because you can see when people move around and it's much easier to track. Okay, sorry, I'm already halfway through my time, so I think I'll move on to a different question, which is related to a comment I make, which is that I did make on the report, which is, for me, successful collaboration on your task, the dyadic or the triadic one, is the most successful when it moves between collaboration phases seamlessly. So in particular, that there's focused collaboration and then there's parallel action. Parallel action, of course, on that taxonomy you showed is a sort of a scale, but overall it might be, if you've negotiated to act separately and then you come back together, that's a really successful overall collaboration. So I'd wonder, I think again, you've mentioned that you could do this, but what do you think you would find these types of these sort of phase, how would you find these phases? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, this is a point I underlined in the first study, like to look at some specific collaboration dynamics. As I think it's very important for a triadic situation, small group, for example, to look at the peers, what the individuals are performed. And also, we need to look individually if the individuals perform physical tasks, or maybe if we can have a situation where we have a person that just don't do anything, he don't move, he don't interact, but he's just thinking of something. Okay, maybe I can do this. I don't really know how we can evaluate this with the indicators, with the variable data we have now. I think, I mean, in real context, it's the same thing as in the virtual one for this problem. But yeah, look at various indicators at the same time. Look at individuals variable and pairs variable at the same time.
Okay.
And not.
Sorry. So you mentioned towards the end that you could use a sort of time series analysis, right? So do you have any specific hypotheses about that, using sort of Monte Carlo analysis or?
I think based on this time of analysis, we're able to find some. I think it will still be context specific, of course. But yeah, we can find specific pattern evolution of indicators. Okay, so like a sequence of indicators, and based on that, we can maybe more assess collaboration in continuous way.
Yes, I mean, an obvious hypothesis would just be what happens in the first minute versus what happens in the middle minutes, right? So there's presumably at the start of your task a negotiation phase and about how to tackle the task. And I'm quite interested, and then later on you'd expect this parallel tasks. Okay, so so given the remaining time, I'd like to move to the last study and talk about the differences between virtual and real. So your participants obviously mentioned some differences, and to some extent it's a short list of fairly well-known things about collaboration in virtual reality. So what do you think are the most important problems with the collaborative virtual reality system? So if you had to come up with a to-do list, which do you think affected that study most?
I think so. The performance of the headset limits a lot the quality of the avatar and the facial expression, so the non-verbal cues in general. Also, for the fourth study, we were in a specific context where we were physically collocated, but in virtual reality. So we were like people like struggling, like, okay, I don't want to fall or to impact with some people. So this specific context, I think, have a lot of impact. But yeah, okay, I forgot the question.
So yes, what are the most important
okay
what are the key hindrances of using the virtual, the sort of virtual reality?
So yeah, I think like the type of avatar, also the way we manage the interaction between the individuals. It will facilitate some interaction. It can help a lot of people to like be immersed in the virtual environment. I speak a little bit about presence and co-presence. So all of the factors that foster these feelings.
And what was the range of experience your participants had with virtual reality?
Sorry?
How much prior experience did your participants have with virtual reality before trying the experiment?
I think it was, there are no prior experience.
Right, okay.
Some persons have some experience, but in general, there are no prior experience.
Okay, and yes, I mean, obviously there are other studies that say that the avatar is very important, not only mainly for identity, right? So you no longer know who is who, right? Because so if we got over that hurdle, so let's assume that the people were experienced, okay, and they had an avatar which they were happy with and other people were happy with, right? Then what do you think are the remaining problems of the situation?
I think we had a facilitator in the situation that can have an influence on the individuals, the way they interact. So of course it has an impact on the situation. And I don't really know what can be the other problem. As I said, the fact that if even in the we were considering the presence, the fact that individuals were not really understanding what the other think or what the other doing due to some performance problem or some.
Okay, I think you mentioned face tracking, right? So that is something that individuals tend to have a strong reaction to, and they can learn to deal with it. Now, what I was suggesting and leading to is that you, especially in your last task, what was very interesting about your last task for me was that it's quite a large number of people, right? So if you're in any sort of group, then you know, in a headset, it's going to be very hard to see the whole group at any one time. And I think that there's something interesting there about missing cues. So I think there's there is a different way. This is more of a comment to finish, by the way, rather than a question, which is that there's a different tack on that comes from the computer-supported cooperative working field, the CACW background, which is more about failures, right? So assuming everybody's symmetric, which in your studies everything's roughly symmetric, then you could look at just, is there any obvious communication that fails? And that last study is one that stuck out for me because there's one of the seminal pieces from back in the 90s was about groups of participants in desktop VR that slowly make bigger and bigger circles. And the reason for that is that the field of view is so narrow that if you've got more than about 3 people, you have to keep stepping back, but then the circle gets bigger. So everybody steps back. So you get this lovely effect of a creeping circle. And if you look back at those systems, which are of course desktop, and they are much more restricted, then I think you still come across these communication failures. So overall, I think the key for me is that the collaboration's been successful, and your thesis has been looking at trying to identify, can we support it somehow? But overall, it's very successful compared to other collaborative virtual environments that have been and gone. Okay, I'll pass back to the chair for the next interlocutor.
It's finished.
Yeah.
Last question. Anthony, it's finished for you.
Yes. That comment was my last comment. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. À distance, Chloé Clavel, je vous laisse la parole.
Okay,
15 minutes pour les examinateurs, s'il vous plaît, si on veut respecter le timing, les contraintes temporelles. Voilà.
Très bien, je garde un regard sur l'heure. So thank you. And first of all, thank you for inviting me for this committee. I discovered a lot of things, so thank you. It was very fruitful for me to be in the committee and to read the thesis. And I would like to congratulate you for all your work and also for the quality of the writing of the thesis. I found it very clearly and very pedagogical also, because I'm not at all from the virtual reality. I'm from natural language processing, and I'm interested in collaborations, but from the perspective of natural language processing. And I also really enjoyed your presentation, and with a lot of visual examples, and it was also really interesting to listen to you. Reading you and listening to you was a good experience for me. So now I will switch to the question part. I will start with general questions about, because here in your thesis you seem to have a lot of contributions that corresponds to data, providing data, collecting data, designing interactive scenario in virtual reality. And I would like to know what will be the future of this data. Have you thought about that? Would it be useful for others? What do you think about the impact of all these works that you've done about the data?
Yeah, so thank you for your comments. For the data, so I already published a data set for the community for the second study, and in this data set also, I don't speak a lot about the pipeline we use to collect the data. It was not really the focus on the presentation, but it is a very big contribution, because with some colleagues we work on a pipeline to collect the data, process it in real time, and so the data set I published was in this format. So if they want, individuals, researcher can take my dataset, create their own component, and analyze the data as it were in real time. So they can test component and test component to process collaboration indicators in real time. So very very interesting. And yeah, the first study also will be published. So this is about the data. It's a very important point of my thesis is to offer to the community so a way to so some collaboration profiles and dataset and triadic collaboration profile also, and also the components I use to process the indicators will be available as an open source project. So researcher will be able also to use my components, my framework to process the data, to process some collaboration indicators, and also we will be able to run the visualization that I show at the end of the presentation. So yeah, this is about the.
Okay, and about also because you propose your own typology, I would say, of the collaboration profiles also, and the data has been annotated on these collaboration profiles. This is it.
So
yeah.
So the data are collaboration scenarios. So there are like scripted scenarios. So I think like they should correspond to specific collaboration scenarios on the continuum.
Okay. It's more, yes, okay. It's not, it's an input and not an annotation from external observers. If indeed there is this type of collaboration profiles. Okay, I understand.
If I wanted to do something for next data set, we need annotation.
Okay.
It's very very important to understand the data, and I missed some annotation for my first study, and it's painful. But I wanted to have annotation at the basis, and yeah, it limits the way we can analyze data and we can interpret the indicators of the dynamics. So
yeah, okay. So as I said, I'm from natural language processing, and I have a PhD student who is working on collaboration analysis, but not with virtual reality, and using focusing on the verbal indicators of collaboration processes. And in your thesis, you mentioned that you use some verbal indicators that are more indicators about conversations, about turn taking, and verbal participations, as far as understood. I think that maybe for the fourth study, because it depends also because of the activities that you consider in the different studies. There are activities where the verbal aspect is maybe not so present. Or do you think that if you had a time, you will have added other verbal indicators that you mentioned, for example, in your literature review in your thesis?
Yeah, if I had the time, I think I will look at more specific indicators of conversational flow, like if people make some pause, if the different type of turn taking, back channels also. Where we look at different type of other indicators. Also look at speech analysis, the discourse type. It's very very rich as data. But as I wanted to work in this thesis on some real-time indicators, it was complicated to work on some discourse type analysis processing. But if I had the time, and also if I had the opportunity to work with an individual that know a lot about the natural language processing, I'd be very happy to explore this indicator.
And I was wondering, for example, is such phenomena such as conversational repair or, yes, conversational repair in particular, where you try to repair. I don't know if in the puzzle game, for example, there were some attempts from the speakers to repair some misunderstanding or things like that. Did you notice some verbal manifestations in your data or?
Not really. I mean, I found some interesting thing looking at the top taking with overlap and without overlap, like in terms of collaboration techniques. But it was more like, yeah, in more complex phases, in more there was like more turn taking with overlap, so like with interruption. So individuals were like it can be also interpreted as a participation, but also as a okay, what we need to do. We don't know what to do. We I don't have the word, but yeah, it can underline various collaborative situations.
Okay. And I have another question also, because you mentioned that you work on multimodalities. And what I understood is that you considered some independent monomodal indicators, and you can correct if I if I misunderstood. And what the question that was asked by Anthony about finding some patterns, do you think that there could be also some intermodal patterns that could be, for example, have gazing but at a certain timing, but pronouncing a certain word or having a certain activity or with a certain prosody? Do you think that this fine grain is too much, or maybe in the data that you considered, or could be relevant?
No, it could be really very interesting. For example, also the proximity. So if people are close or not. If we in the dynamics, I found the first study, for example, I can find if people are close and they look at each other, so they're interpret. At the same time, we can detect the speech. Maybe they are speaking together. So yeah, consider the speech, the spatial positioning, the visual indicators. I think it's very useful approach to compute to assess collaboration dynamics and understand what's happened in the collaborative situations.
Okay. And then one last questions about emotions. So you mentioned in the perspectives that you would like to consider emotions. In your thesis, you mentioned emotions that, for example, emotional engagement. But do you think that another way, what kind of emotions you had in mind for your perspectives? And something that is a little bit linked also is that do you think that there could be also conflicting profile? I don't know, because here it's collaborative or not, but and different ways of collaborating that are I think that there are not in our typology things that corresponds to conflicting profiles. No.
I mean, everything, nothing, or leader-follower profile can be maybe conflicting profile.
Okay.
If we have the speech, for example, speech analysis, maybe we can find. And also, you speak about the prosody. We can find maybe people are like a little bit angry, or I don't know. We can look at this side of emotion, understanding the feeling of the individuals. It can be interesting to look at this to refine the profile, the different profiles. When I speak about emotion, it was in different ways. So first, can we look at the stress, cognitive load, for example, let's see.
The stress, okay, yeah.
So stress. And for the prosody, yeah, if look at the way individuals interact, if they are close or not. So it can be, considering emotion can be very interesting, yeah, to refine it and find more specific collaboration profiles and also collaboration dynamics.
Okay. Okay, thank you. I think that the time is finished for me. So thank you for your answer. And I give the floor.
Pour le second rapporteur. Voilà.
Merci, Madame la Présidente.
20 minutes pour le rapporteur.
Yeah. So thank you very much for your presentation. That was very clear and that is a really very interesting overview of your work. First of all, I would thank your supervisor team for inviting me to attend to this defense. And I should just recall that we met a few years ago in Swansea for a workshop at the starting. I think it was the starting of Aurélien work, and there was already the first step of the first study. So it's very I'm very happy to be here and to see what was done during these 3 years. So I read the manuscript, and before going to the question and comments, just a few words. The first one is that I found that your manuscript was really very well written and well organized, and in particular, I found very interesting to have the key points for future research section in your in your document. I should also emphasize the quality of publication and communication that have already been obtained, and also it was well written, and I have really a great pleasure to sometimes this sort of technical work can be a little tricky for somebody coming from psychology. So for me, it was clear and even pleasant to read it. Maybe just a few. I don't know. It's not a comment. It's much more a short reaction to your presentation before going into some of the questions I already sent to you in my report. So I want to go deeper within this question. But before, I was a little surprised in your first theoretical presentation of what is meant by collaboration. You started by talking about collaboration, and then distinguishing between collaboration and collaboration or collaborative processes. And you say that collaboration is communication, coordination. But when you mention processes, you didn't speak about communication and coordination anymore. So what does it mean? Does it mean that you think that coordination and communication is not a process, or that there are some processes which are involved in communication, but communication, how do you see this point?
I think that so we have collaboration, we have communication, coordination, and then we have the processes that are on the layer. So we have communication, collaboration at a higher level of the processes.
Yeah, because
and the processes contribute to the.
Because if you're speaking about situational awareness means at some point that you should exchange information, and exchanging information refers directly to conversation. So it's part of the processing.
Yeah, true.
It's just really a little bit. It does not matter. But I was somehow surprised by this point. Another point also very quickly was when you spoke about characteristics. Group characteristics, it was about indicators. And for me, it was also quite strange to think that some characteristics, which are part of the group constitution, would be a collaboration indicator.
I mean, so I said group characteristic. It was like the individual in the group.
Yeah, it's
more characteristic.
For me, it seems that it's more something which is at the start or at the initial state of the collaboration. So you can define that if people are, for example, have the same expertise or in an opposite way, different expertise, it has an effect on the way that collaboration will be carried out. But it's not per se an indicator of collaboration. At least if you want to look at collaboration processes and the quality of collaboration.
And when I said it, I agree with you. It's not the same type of indicators that the one we can process automatically or during the activity. But engagement can be processed. But yeah, indeed, engagement, yes. Expertise, social proximity, it's very specific to the relationship between the individual or the individual itself before the collaboration. But there are some characteristics that have an influence on the collaborative situation. So I said it's something that we can evaluate the activity, but they can't be assessed automatically during the activity the same way as the other indicators.
Yeah. That's like motivation. Also, motivation.
Yeah, motivation engagement is like
can evaluate during the collaboration, course of collaboration. There could be variations. Something also well, not surprised, but it's much more about clarification. In your different studies, yes, in the five studies, one of the points is about what you put some time symmetry, equality, and
yes,
and how do you articulate? For me, it was much more that if as if you use quite the same terms depending on the study, and so it was a little make a sort of fuzzy view on that, because symmetry or at the opposite, dominance, domination, I don't know what. It's quite the two sides of the same coin.
I think it's an artifact of the literature review and the authors. For example, symmetry is very specific to the Dillenburg literature review. So it's pretty similar. Symmetry in the interaction is an equal distribution of the interaction. And at the same way, dominance dominance is more concept the dimension we can compute with an equal distribution or an unequal distribution.
Yeah, I agree that it's not always so clear in the literature.
Yeah.
And maybe one very interesting point you supplementary collaboration beyond your PhD you could done is to try to clarify the way that these different concepts are used, and in particular when you want to go into the how to measure it. because actually you use some data in a quite similar way, depending on the study, even if the terms in the literature is not exactly the same. And it would be much clearer, and I think that it can provide a good help for the next coming researcher on the topic to know, to have a sort of common ground on the way to use data collections to assess collaboration. Okay, so if these were only some short reaction to your presentation, and now I will go to the question, the initial question. Yes, so maybe something I will add before is that, yeah, in your results, and I think that it's somehow related to what Anthony Steve said just before, when he spoke about the difference between virtual and real situation. I think that your results show clearly, at least from my view, that at the moment, and maybe for sometimes, virtual reality technology is limited in regards to real situations. And I know that some of my colleagues show that in using driver simulation, underlining the fact that in some situations, even if the behavior seems to be quite similar to what can be observed in a real world, because of the characteristic of the simulations, level of control, sensory motor differences, because you have essential vision information, but no information regarding speed and acceleration and so on. But due to all these differences, they could use different strategies to achieve quite the same behavior. And so I think that first it's interesting because it shows this limitation of the technology, but also it means that did you, I don't know, through interviews or data you collected, see if people between the two situations finally adopted different strategy to cope with the task, depending on being in the virtual or in the real environment.
So it was more in the fourth study that we compared.
No, for the fourth
study. There are some. So individuals indicate that there are some difficulty in understanding nonverbal signals, and also sometimes they choose like very different avatar of what they look in the real life. So people like struggle in which is the person who is speaking. I don't know. I don't know who's speaking. So they developed some specific strategy when they relies more on the discourse type, on the verbal signals, because visually it was not as good as in the real life. And we found in the first study that there were like more silence between individuals when they speak. There are more silence because they didn't really know when the person finished his sentence or not. So, in the interview they underline that they focus more on verbal on the gestures.
I would suggest if you have the possibility to also look at this dimension of the situation, because the way that people use technology differently, depending on if it's in a simulation like in VR or if it's in real situation, could provide also a lot of insights regarding the way to enhance VR interactions. And also it could explain somehow some of the results that could be relatively disappointing. If one just look at the performance. Another point I find is that for me, your work also provide really good evidence that if you want to measure collaboration, task performance is not the good indicator. It's not so easy because I know that even in the literature, there are a lot of papers that still use task performance as an indicator of the collaboration. And you clearly show that it's not a good indicator. Some other colleagues of mine also observe that type of phenomenon in other situations, like, for example, design meetings and so on, where you can have a lot of conflict and situation really of bad collaboration with good performance, or in the opposite, an atmosphere of very good collaboration within the group, but a very bad design, because nobody wants to be in conflict with the other. So everything is smooth and nothing really comes from the collaborative situation. So I think that it's really a very important point. And my question from this assertion is that how do you? Because for me it was not so clear in your report. How actually? What do you? How would you define a good collaboration?
I love that question. So yeah, I
that question, but
it's
your topic.
Yeah, but it's a very complicated question. I already discussed with it with some person that are in the room.
It's just
no. So as you say, it can be related to performance, at least not in it's my task and not in other type of task. We need to rely on the way people interact together, and yeah, so sometimes you just enjoy the collaboration with the other. You're very effective in your task, but you just take some extra time sometimes. So yeah, I think good collaboration for me, it's when individual exchange, where they are like rich exchange. So it was the discourse type, it was the discussion task, for example. We have other type of tasks that are not focused on the discussion. But there are some dialogue, conversational flow. And also, I will not speak about spatial behaviors or spatial indicators because it will depend on the task. Sometimes people are very separate in the space, but they exchange a lot. So we need to consider at the same time the different indicators. But Anthony spoke about like the a sequential of okay, we have these indicators, then this one, there's this one, there's this one, and we can say that the last that we pass through different type of collaboration and different type of. So there are some indicators that are relevant as a key step, I think, to assess a specific collaboration profile or dynamics. But yeah, some I think are relevant to characterize a good collaboration, as I said, verbal indicators.
Yeah, in the same way, in the same vein, it was interesting to see that subjective assessment of collaboration within drug group didn't correlate with.
Yeah.
And it's also a point that I think that for future, it's important to try to both approach collaboration as an external observer, trying to find some indicators that in sort of objective way can characterize collaboration, and on the other side, to see how it is experienced by the participant.
About the experience of the participant, I see that some like implicitly, because it was fun, because we speak a lot during the task, we had a good collaboration. So there are some. It was from the thematic analysis on the on the interview. So they feel that they collaborate well because they change, but not the good information at the same moment at the good moment. There is no coordination. So I think maybe we must first define, as you said, what people think is a good collaboration, and then maybe based on this referential, spread the data. Yeah. Probablement rien, on m'a dit.
Une minute. Okay. Yeah. Last question. What do you think that it will change in the way that you can analyze collaboration, the quality of collaboration will change, try to take into account the time? Because usually, except if you make laboratory tasks as an experimental psychology, collaboration is something which is more or less long-term. So time is important. And how do you can imagine you can integrate some indicators related to the time?
Yeah.
Not easy.
Yeah, but I have some.
Yes.
It's a good point. Yeah, I found that I use in the study a specific time window based on my task and on other tasks that are submitted. It was my choice, but to analyze collaboration. And indeed, some indicators are not very relevant in a shorter term, and sometimes they need to be assessed also in relation to another indicator that was relevant, but it's the last sliding windows, so it's not very easy to understand. Related to time, I will answer the same thing I did. I speak just earlier about like a sequence of indicators, an evolution of trying to find specific dynamics, specific patterns, and I think it's the key to interpret collaboration within the time. And maybe sometimes if we detect, for example, that okay, we have this based on the indicators, we enter in a specific collaboration phases. If we had the experience of this collaboration phases is relevant for this reason, and we can look at these indicators at this time, we can extend maybe okay, for this, because we are in this phases, I will consider this time window, for example, for your time assessment, because I know that this indicators is relevant and these indicators need to be assessed within a minute, 2 minutes, or a second. So I think I will do this in this way.
Okay, thank you.
And for me, it's easier for me to speak in French.
Okay.
Alors moi, j'ai été, je remercie donc l'équipe encadrante également de m'avoir invitée et je savais aussi que j'étais dans le CSI. Donc, j'ai suivi l'évolution des travaux sur voilà, les réunions de présentation du CSI, donc c'est le comité de suivi de thèse en fait. Donc, j'étais réjouie d'avoir le manuscrit final et donc de voir le travail abouti en fait. Et je précise que je ne vais pas revenir sur les points précis des expérimentations, des études, mais je veux juste échanger sur quelques points sur lesquels on n'a pas eu l'occasion d'échanger au cours du CSI et le rendu final en fait de ce travail. Voilà. Puisqu'il y a beaucoup de choses qui ont été, beaucoup de questions qui ont été posées. Bien sûr, j'avais plusieurs petites remarques ou de choses qui m'étaient venues, mais je vais sélectionner. Le fois dépasser, c'est vraiment un échange en fait. Hein,
Oui, très bien.
Peut-être des commentaires aussi. J'aurais 3 points enfin. Le premier point, dans l'état de l'art que vous avez fait, vous avez donc vous êtes revenu sur différentes notions, concepts, coordination, communication, attention conjointe, synchronie, en fait, pour définir et évaluer la collaboration. Donc, vous avez posé plusieurs modèles. Et en fait, bien évidemment, moi, je me suis dit, ah, c'est dommage, il va pas présenter d'autres modèles. Enfin, voilà, il y en avait déjà pas mal. Mais moi, je vous invite peut-être sur cet aspect parce qu'après, pour la suite, je pense que ça pourrait, dans les discussions ou l'analyse des indicateurs multiples, ça peut donner des pistes. Notamment, il y a dans certains modèles fondateurs dans la science des équipes, en fait, vous parlez j'ai noté du 3C, 5C, du Common Ground, de Awareness, etc. Et en fait, vous évoquez peu, et je pense que vous connaissez sûrement les modèles Input, Process, Output.
Ouais.
Voilà. Et en fait, dans ces modèles de Input, Process, Output, ou aussi les plus récents, le modèle du SALAS, il y a la distinction, en fait, déjà, il distingue bien processus, comportement et indicateur dans ces modèles-là. Et il y a aussi les variables d'entrée, le système des inputs. Vous avez groupe caractéristique ou task. Tout ça, on va en discuter. Et ça, je pense que ça aurait été plutôt des modèles qui pouvaient aider à classer les choses. Donc, je ne sais pas si je les ai pas je sais pas pourquoi vous ne l'avez pas présenté. Parce que ça peut donner cette impression qu'il y a une juxtaposition de concepts. Et je pense qu'un modèle intégrateur comme Input, Process, Output ou les modèles IMO aurait été intéressant pour la suite de vos discussions, de vos travaux. Donc, je ne sais pas si ça a été un choix. Ou...
It was a choice. I hesitated a long time. So I know the model. I hesitated a long time to add it in my literature review. But it was more like on the CLCW, more compute, very not very computer, but it was not oriented in the way I wanted to consider collaboration and assess collaboration. So this is the reason why I didn't consider I add this model in my literature. And also, I know that I wanted to focus on the interaction itself, so without really considering the input. So this is the reasons why I don't really speak about that. I know that we have expertise, social proximity. If the person takes some 3 cups of coffee before coming to the task, I know that it has some influence. But yeah, it was a choice to not speak of this model. I think it at the time I wrote it, it didn't fit in well. That review. So it was.
Le second point, sur lequel on peut échanger, sur le choix des indicateurs qui sont retenus, des indicateurs pour évaluer cette collaboration. Moi, j'ai 2 questions, enfin des choses que j'ai rapportées bien évidemment à ma background, mais c'est juste pour échanger, éventuellement pour peut-être creuser dans vos résultats que vous avez déjà. Je me suis, en fait, vous avez un peu dans vos diades, je n'ai pas trouvé dans votre manuscrit si elles étaient dans vos différentes études, par exemple les diades ou les triades, notamment les diades, on va partir sur ces premières études, si elles étaient par exemple, les personnes étaient familières ou pas, le degré de familiarité dans les diades, et notamment si c'était le cas ou s'ils se connaissent un peu, ces diades familières peuvent engager des processus de coordination assez implicites. Et donc, la communication verbale, par exemple, elle va être s'ils ont développé un système, par exemple, de mémoire transactive, partagée, ils vont donc peu avoir à communiquer verbalement. Mais pourtant, ils seront efficients et ils auront bien collaboré, coordination implicite. Donc, je ne sais pas si dans vos diades que vous décrivez pas, mais là aussi, j'ai trouvé que tout ce qui était les processus socio-affectifs, on n'en parle pas trop. Et est-ce que c'était le cas ou pas du tout? Est-ce que dans vos diades, ils ne se connaissent pas, ils sont étrangers, ils n'ont jamais travaillé ensemble de leurs travaux? Voilà. Ou est-ce que vous pensez que ça peut, dans certaines diades, avoir joué dans vos résultats ou pas?
So in the first study, they knowing each other for the diad, so they know each other. All of the diad know each other. So as you said, yeah, it had influence on implicit verbal story too. So it was like control. The first study, the diads, the individual diad know each other. In the third study, choose to have triad where the individuals don't know each other. It was a very choice, and same for the fourth study, they don't know each other. So yeah, this was control on the experiment. And yeah, it was controlled because for the two last study, because yeah, as you said, I know that it influences the interaction, especially because I want to look at verbal indicators. Yeah, if I don't control this, I can't really look in an efficient way in my indicators. So this was a criticism of the first study. So this is why I control this.
Sur l'indicateur des proxémies, spatial, peut-être vous parlez de la proximité spatiale euclidienne, en fait, comme vous l'avez mesuré, les indicateurs, c'est euclidien. Et peut-être regarder aussi le concept de proximité de distance fonctionnelle. En fait, c'est pas une distance euclidienne, c'est aussi une distance, on peut être proche si on a une accessibilité visuelle. Par exemple, ici, la distance fonctionnelle entre nous et vous, elle est forte parce que j'ai peu d'accessibilité visuelle, alors qu'avec vous, je suis plus loin spatialement. D'un point de vue fonctionnel, vu qu'on a une forte accessibilité visuelle, je me place. Donc, en fait, est-ce que vous aviez... alors, on est dans la réalité virtuelle, mais est-ce que, selon les natures des tâches aussi, que vous n'avez pas forcément maîtrisées, si je suis en collaboration, coordination, face à face et côte à côte, c'est pas la même chose. Donc, je me suis demandé si cet indicateur de proxémie purement spatial et euclidien, ça peut suffire. Est-ce qu'il n'y a pas des choses plus fines, multimodales, justement, avec l'accessibilité visuelle, les regards, tout ça?
I think so. I will speak about the fourth study and then the first one. For the fourth study, it was discussion task. So we didn't really have something that can influence the proxémie. So for this one, I think proxémie, spatial Euclidean distance can be interesting. Just for the other task, indeed, the accessibility to the table, the accessibility to the space, I think have a very need to have a specific interpretation. Consider the indicators. This indicator specifically. The distance between individual. So in the first study, were mostly used as a way to compute face information and not as an indicator themselves. So it was like individuals are close. It was 1.5 meters. Then I can check if they are in a specific spatial configuration. So it was more in this way for these indicators.
pareil, sont revenus sur les différents indicateurs.
Ouais.
Sur poser davantage aux résultats. Et ça vient d'être évoqué dans les discussions à différents moments par les autres membres du jury, mais sur le contenu même de vos discours, enfin des interactions verbales, je suis assez d'accord avec ce qui vient d'être souligné sur le fait que dans des équipes efficientes, il faut du conflit, par exemple, ce qu'on appelle du conflit épistémique. Et c'est plutôt bien, alors que le conflit socio-affectif, sur les personnes, c'est une entrave. Et donc, ça pourrait être intéressant d'aller voir s'il y a eu du conflit épistémique, enfin, du conflit. On l'évoquait à différents moments. Moi, je serais allée creuser là-dessus.
Yeah. I know that this is a missing part of understanding and go more in depth in the indicators. But yeah, it's true. Just I think maybe consider the category of the speech, of the discourse, of it can be very, very, very useful. But yeah, I think I need to consider this in my future research. Specific indicators. Yeah.
Et ma dernière remarque, en fait, c'était en fait, dans votre travail, vous avez évoqué une diversité de tâches, d'environnement, de composition de groupe, essayer d'étendre de diade à triade et la groupe, etc. Donc ça, vous avez visé finalement, j'avais l'impression, une validité externe à vos travaux en évoquant cette diversité de tâches, de répliquer dans différents éléments. Mais moi, ça a pu me donner aussi cette impression, en fait, parfois d'éparpillement, de manque d'intégration. Pourquoi vous avez choisi à chaque fois de changer, par exemple, de tâches ou de composition d'équipe? C'est vraiment la validité externe, ça c'est bien, mais pourquoi ne pas avoir gardé une tâche et aller plus finement dans vos processus de collaboration et vos métriques? Je me suis posé cette question, et notamment avec la lecture du chapitre 7. Je me suis dit: «Ah non, une autre tâche qui était en cours, mais pourquoi vous avez voulu, vous cherchez la validité externe et peut-être la valeur écologique de vos travaux», donc ça, je vous salue pour cet aspect. Mais parfois, moi, j'aurais aimé d'aller chercher la petite aiguille en gardant la même tâche, la même diade, enfin les mêmes configurations. Je sais pas. Qu'est-ce qui a présidé à ces choix-là?
So for the first, it was because the first task was had a lot of limitation regarding the design of the task. So this is why I chose to move on to the triadic activity. And also, what I was thinking, it was me personally, I'm not really interested in the diad itself, but I'm interested in the diad in the small group. So this is why I chose to move into small groups. And for the fourth study, it was more an opportunity because it was an internship. So I don't really choose the task. It was, yeah. So this is the reason why the fourth study is very different in type of task, and I explore discussion task. It's not, but on my work, it was more physical activity, co-manipulation, like present-farming task. And for the study that I didn't present now, but that is in preparation, it was because the task we designed was more like abstract, and we wanted to assess collaboration in a more core task in the reality. This is why I chose the industrial context. In the diads, because it was more like it's a very, very specific, like with this task is very specific because compared to the other, we limit the space where people can move. So there are specific roles, specific. So it was more like, yeah, this task was more like a collaboration, same with another people, another researcher that wanted to assess, that wanted to merge his approach in critical system and in real collaboration with my indicators and my approach for real-time computation of the indicators. So, that's it.
Cédric, qui est à distance.
Oui, merci Estelle. Yes, so I don't have any question. I will just make a quick comment about Aurélien's PhD. So I'm going to do it in French, Anthony. I'm sorry, more for the crowd and the attendance. Du coup, je voulais remercier Aurélien pour la... Vous m'entendez, oui? Ouais.
On t'entend, Cédric.
Très bien.
Pardon. Je voulais remercier Aurélien pour la qualité de son travail. Quand on a démarré cette thèse avec Mathieu, c'était la première thèse qu'on a engagée sur la mesure automatique ou la tentative de mesure automatique de la collaboration. Donc, on était très content d'avoir quelqu'un qui avait un profil et psycho et info. Mais bien sûr, on a pu aller si loin parce que explorer autant de choses, voilà, parce qu'Aurélien s'est beaucoup engagé sur le sujet, il a passé beaucoup de temps, il a beaucoup travaillé pendant ces quelques années. Voilà, donc on voulait le remercier. Bravo Aurélien. C'est tout. Je laisse la parole au reste de mes collègues encadrants.
Merci. Je passe la parole à Mathieu Chollet, qui est l'autre encadrant. Et voilà, vous avez encore quelques minutes. Hein. Très court, Cédric, merci, ça nous fait gagner du temps.
So, thank you very much, Chloé, for your comments and being here. Like Cédric, I will talk in French for the crowd. Sorry, Anthony. Donc oui, donc voilà, pareil, même chose, pas de questions. Mais plus de questions, on les a toutes posées. Déjà pendant ces 3 ans. Et même plus que 3 ans, en fait. Effectivement, ce que n'a pas dit Cédric, mais c'est qu'on a rencontré Aurélien déjà il y a plus de 5 ans, quand il a fait un premier stage chez nous, sur la conscience de la situation de l'archiverie, donc déjà quelque chose qui touchait à la collaboration très profond. Et déjà à l'époque, j'étais très impressionné, voilà, son travail de revue de la littérature et la quantité de travail. On était tellement impressionnés qu'on voulait lui offrir une thèse déjà, mais il est parti, mince, mais il est revenu. Après, un master en plus en réalité virtuelle et informatique, vraiment, c'était excellent pour nous. Et on était très heureux parce qu'on savait que ça allait se passer très bien, parce qu'on avait déjà travaillé avec toi. Et donc, ça a été vraiment un très grand plaisir. Et comment dire, toute ton implication, ton engagement, donc à chaque fois très préparé, a vraiment rendu notre travail le plus facile possible en tant qu'encadrant. C'est vraiment un véritable plaisir. Donc, je vais juste dire quelques mots, voilà, sur tout le travail accompli, parce que je pense que c'est les résultats, mais il faut connaître un peu le domaine pour se rendre compte de toutes les choses qu'il faut mettre en place pour en arriver à tes résultats. Donc, maîtriser la mesure, signaux sociaux en temps réel, créer des environnements virtuels, toute cette pipeline d'analyse. Alors, certes, avec le support de personnes très importantes, avec principalement. Je remercie beaucoup. Mais donc, des choses extrêmement complexes que beaucoup de personnes n'arrivent pas à déployer dans tant d'amplitude dans le cadre de leur thèse. Vraiment une quantité de travail et une qualité de travail très impressionnante. Et donc, Aurélien non seulement a fait énormément d'excellent travail, mais donc a su collaborer en tant que personne qui maîtrise la collaboration dans tous ces aspects. Non seulement avec nous, les encadrants, avec son équipe locale, mais aussi à l'étranger d'ailleurs, avec une équipe à Glasgow. Et donc, voilà, c'est pas gabarre sur la collaboration. Je vais simplement dire que je suis très reconnaissant de tout ton travail. Je pense que j'ai très hâte de voir ce que tu vas faire dans le futur. Je pense que tu auras une excellente trajectoire dans la recherche que j'ai vraiment hâte de voir. Et donc, l'équipe et l'université qui t'accueilleront beaucoup de chance. Donc, j'ai beaucoup de chance parce que tu rejoins Glasgow, pas moi, mais mon collègue. Et donc, voilà, j'ai hâte de voir ce que tu feras avec nous à Glasgow chez Williams. Merci beaucoup. Merci.
Et donc, je passe la parole à Cédric Fleury, le directeur de thèse.
Thank you. So I will also have no question. I will have really similar comment to what Mathieu says, so I will say them in English. It will not repeat what Mathieu was saying. So I first want to thank the reviewer and examiner for evaluating your work. Thank you very much. And I really want to congratulate you for the hard work achieved during these 3 years. I think that automatically assessing collaboration was a very challenging topic. And your work is a significant contribution to this topic and provide many interesting perspectives. I really want to highlight that it was a complex multidisciplinary topic at the crossroad between computer science and psychology. A strong skill in both domains. So you have been a very independent and motivated student who always push hard to try to get the best results. So of course it was not always easy, and yeah, you did not always get expected results, as it's always the case in a PhD. But you never gave up. You always try to keep a very good spirit. Even when you got heavy rain making a lot of noise on the roof during the defense, you still keep the same good spirit. So I really appreciate this good spirit all along the 3 years. And as Mathieu said, I also want to add that the topic was also very technically challenging. So especially for you that have an initial background in psychology, but I think like you had to handle complex technical system to manage multiple devices, record and fuse data in real time, process data with AI systems, speech to text system, develop multi-user VR application, and make them run in a VR headset. So of course, you, as Mathieu mentioned, you got help from engineer and intern, but I think yourself, you also demonstrate very good development skills. So congratulations for that. And the other challenge, I think, was running experiment about collaboration. That is always very complex, especially when you have to handle triads or group of people. Like it's not just one participant at a time, but you have to find 6 participants at the same time, I think, for your experiment in Glasgow. So this is very challenging. Always put a lot of effort in designing the experiment in a rigorous way and spend a lot of time running this experiment. So I really want to highlight that this was also a lot of work. And finally, I really appreciate your very good personal skill. I think you had another challenge that was to deal with 3 supervisors in 3 cities. I think we only met 1 or 2 times all together in person during the PhD, maybe just 1 in Glasgow.
Yeah, I think.
So this was, I think, a really challenge. And despite this, I feel like the collaboration was very smooth. And I believe this is mainly due to your strong collaboration skill and positive attitude. So thank you for this. So yeah, in conclusion, it was really a pleasure to work with you. I believe you make valuable contributions to the evaluation of collaboration, and that you open many interesting perspectives for your future career. So as Mathieu said, I really wish you all the best for the future and wanted to see what you will do in the future. Congratulations. Okay.
Est-ce qu'il y a une dernière question? Last question.
Maybe someone with the audience about the PhD could ask a question. Is there any question?
Alors, est libéré.
Yes.
So for me and Chloé, I sent you a link for another Zoom for the deliberation. So we're going to have a discussion. We need to move the room, so it'll take 5 minutes.
Okay,
But it will sort of. Dans l'avancée de c'est devenu en tout cas. La dernière date,
Oui, mais ah oui, bah écoute, c'est là où j'ai pris mes notes. Tu l'as préparé? D'accord, faut finir les muscles, alors c'est important. Oui, ouais, donc c'est l'anecdote, tu en verras peut-être. Ouais, écoute, c'est pas envoyé en PDF, parce que c'est surtout pour des thésards. Ouais, alors en fait, c'est pas la version définitive, mais je te vois. J'ai envie de la ah, non, c'est moi, c'est pas la version. Très bien. Eh ben, je te l'envoie à ce moment-là dans la journée ou demain. Ça roule, merci. Merci beaucoup. Ouais. Alors, on va. Au revoir. Tony.
Ouais, ça va être-
Deliberate. Aurélien Léchappé presented his doctoral thesis entitled Measuring and Modeling Team Activity in Virtual Reality from Social Signals to Collaboration Methods. The thesis is involving in 4 multidisciplinary perspectives between psychology and computer science, addressing the important topic of digital collaboration in virtual worlds and beyond for an approach based on a set of multimodal signals. The thesis has substantive theoretical, experimental, and technical contribution to the field of collaboration systems. The presentation by the candidate was structured, clear, and very pedagogical, highlighting the main theoretical and empirical contribution of the thesis. The committee appreciated the oral presentation, which was illustrated by relevant visualization. Then the committee members commented, discussed, and asked questions to which Aurélien Léchappé responded clearly, showing his mastery of the field. After deliberation, the committee unanimously decided to award the PhD in computer science for IMT Atlantic.
Congratulations.
In the presence of my peers, with the completion of my doctorate in computer science, in my quest for knowledge, I have carried out demanding research, demonstrated intellectual rigor, ethical reflection, and respect for the principles of research integrity. I have pursued my, as I pursue my professional career, whatever my chosen field, I pledge to the greatest of my ability to continue to maintain integrity in my relationship to knowledge, in my methods, and in my results.
Félicitations.
Merci. Qu'est-ce qu'il y a après?
Ah, qu'est-ce qu'il y a après? Je vous invite,
Pour la thèse décisive.
je vous invite à aller dans le forum, du coup. Voilà, il y aura un petit pot et des démos aussi. Alors, je vais devoir setup la démo. On va y avoir. Tu vas avoir ton train, ça va peut-être compliqué.
Ouais, moi, c'est depuis très longtemps, malheureusement.
Et voilà, mais du coup, je vais présenter une démo de l'environnement de la 3e étude. Voilà, et puis un petit jeu à côté. Voilà.
Il y aura d'autres occasions.
Bah oui, il y aura d'autres occasions. Voilà, vous t'invitez.
Anthony, Cédric.
Anthony and Cedric Swedish. Thank you, Anthony.